Today we are joined on the first 50 pages by an author who, after 2 books and 3 novellas, has quickly become one of my all-time favorite romance authors.
Ali Hazelwood is a TikTok sensation and the New York Times bestselling author of The Love Hypothesis, Love on the Brain, and her most recent release, Loathe to Love You.
Originally from Italy, Ali lived in both Japan and Germany before eventually moving to the United States to pursue a PhD in neuroscience. She has also recently added professor to her growing list of accomplishments.
Welcome to the first 50 pages, Ali.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So you burst onto the scene with your debut novel, The Love Hypothesis, which quickly blew up on Book Talk. It was a Goodreads Choice Award nominee for Best Romance in 2021. Since reading that book, I learned that it was loosely based on a fan fiction story you wrote about Rey and Kylo Ren from Star Wars. Would you mind sharing what inspired you to start writing fan fiction?
I started writing fan fiction when I think in my last year of grad school. I think I just really needed some kind of outlet that wasn't, reading academic papers or writing academic papers or thinking about academic papers. I think I just needed something else. So originally I'm a long time Star Trek fan. So originally I was writing Star Trek fan fiction, and then I kind of got into Star Wars and started with Star Wars. But fan fiction is just I've always been very fangirly, I guess. I've always been the type to get really obsessed about media and about things and about musical acts and stuff like that. So I feel like fan fiction was kind of where I was supposed to end up all along.
I totally understand that. I've talked multiple times on our podcast about how much of a fangirl of Harry Potter I am, and just being able to read all the extra stories on AO3 and all the other fan fiction platforms. You're like, I finally get to know more about these characters, or maybe an alternative storyline or different things like that. I think that's the cool part about fan fiction.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Would you mind talking about how you made the jump to published author from being a fan fiction writer?
So it was a lot of chance and a lot of luck, in the sense that my agent, her name is Taole, she is a very she's also a fangirl. She's also very, very interested in in fan fiction. And one day she kind of came across my fan fiction on AO3, and she was like, I think you could be a published romance author. I think what you write is something that could kind of fit in the traditional publishing landscape. Would you like to try to work on something like that? And that's kind of how we ended up, revising one of my fan fictions, the one that was kind of the most, I want to say revisable, the one that made most sense to revise. And then we went on sub, and The Love Hypothesis ended up being published.
So how do you think the perception of fan fiction has changed in the last few years?
Oh, it's so hard to say for me, because I am very, I am surrounded by people like me who really love and who love fan fiction in a very unashamed, unabashed way, and that I'm a fangirl or a fanboy, but I'm into these kind of fanish things and I love them. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people who look down on fan fiction still, but I don't really I try not to interact with them. It's hard for me to tell what the public at large thinks. I've been very I guess I've been very protective kind of my mental health by avoiding people who speak negatively about things that others enjoy, especially if they do it from a place of, it's not highbrow enough, it's not artistic enough, it's not good enough. So I really don't know what the average person thinks of fan fiction.
Kelsey and I, by profession, are librarians, and we interact with all kinds of people all the time. One of the things that we love to talk with guests on this podcast about is the power of the story. And I'm not part of a fandom. I didn't really, until researching for this interview, really kind of understand some of the aspects of it. But it seems like this is, this power of the story is especially relevant to fan fiction and fandoms. Just this whole idea, getting into the characters, to explore different aspects of books. Like I get you don't want to let the characters go. And I think for readers of any kind, when you really get into a story, it is hard to let the characters go.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think that's a big part of, I've always had a very big, book and show hangovers. And even since I was a child, I would get super obsessed. Like I remember watching Sailor Moon when I was a child and being super obsessed with the characters. It's just that when I was young, I didn't know what fan fiction was. And there wasn't a whole lot, I didn't grow up speaking English, so I didn't really know, I didn't even really have access to a whole lot of stuff on the internet because, most of the internet is in English and there wasn't a whole lot in Italian in terms of fan fiction. But yeah, I think it's exactly what you're saying. Like, it's just, we don't want to let go of the characters. We want to know more about that world, that story, that dynamic. Fan fiction is a perfect way of never having to separate yourself from characters that you love.
Yeah, and I think there's a certain comfort there. Like they're the characters you know and you love, and like you said, you don't want to let go of and stay immersed in that and keep comfortable, and they bring you joy. And
absolutely.
But I read that more people than ever are understanding the appeal of fan fiction. I think really for me, this was really a fun exercise. And I think understanding this is going to make me a better librarian, because we're able to, engage with people that come and ask us about stories that I maybe wouldn't have connected with the fan fiction or, fandom.
I think I definitely don't think that everyone has to love fan fiction. And I definitely think that, it's funny. I don't know if, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Kate Claiborne.
Yep.
She's a fantastic romance writer. Actually, she has a book coming out this month, Georgie All Along, which was one of my favorite reads of last year. She's amazing. But I was on a panel with her and we ended up talking about fan fiction. And she was saying that for her, when she is done reading a book, the story is over for her. So she never kind of felt the need to seek fan fiction, and that's so different from my experience, but it's also something that I totally understand. Like we're all different. So I definitely get it. But I do think there is something about how fan fiction can be so joyful. Like sometimes we actively are giving happy endings to stories that have a sad ending, or we are sometimes there are side characters that just don't really get the justice that they need in canon, and we kind of write it for them. And there's something that is incredibly, I don't know, it feels like such an act of, we are taking over the showrunners. We're taking over all these people who historically have more power than us when it comes to telling stories, and we're taking this storytelling power from them. And that's something that I don't know, I really, really enjoy, and it makes me feel powerful in a weird way.
Yeah.
Ali, how is your writing process different for fan fiction compared to writing for traditional publishing? And academic paper writing is, its own, I just assume your writing process is different.
It has to be, mostly because, you're not just writing for yourself and your friends anymore. You're kind of writing for a bigger audience. The idea of traditional publishing, and I mean, editors, writers, we all do it because we love to tell stories and we love to read stories and we love to, share our writings and thoughts with others. But there is this, I want to say, capitalistic element to traditional publishing where you kind of have to write a product that is going to somehow sell, or at least be at least you have to convince, like the sales department at your publisher that something is going to be a worthwhile investment for them. So it's a very different process. Like, while fan fiction is literally, I had this idea, I sit down, I write it the way I want it, and then I, slap it online. I would say that with traditional publishing, it's kind of a conversation for me with, and I'm sure it's different for every single author, but for me, it's a conversation with my agent and my editor where, I have an idea, I tell them about my idea, they tell me what they think, then I write them a brief summary. They tell me, yes, okay, this sounds good. And then I write it, and then, I send it to them, and then they edit it. So I guess what I mean to say is, it's less of an instinctive, it's less about like the compulsive act of wanting to share a story and doing so immediately, and more about, a lot of planning and a lot of making a lot of considerations about who is eventually going to read this and how they're going to react to that, and is this going to be profitable and stuff like that.
Sounds a lot like work.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like, it's it definitely is, and it's fun work, but it is work. Yeah.
On your website, you mentioned that your favorite thing in the world is to explore traditional romance tropes and to then picture how they'll play out in academic settings. So this may or may not seem like a simple question, but why become a romance writer, or why romance?
I think it was always my favorite genre to read. I always really loved love. I loved love stories, and I don't know. I mean, I think I could really try to think about it and look into why my favorite thing to read was always love stories, but it really kind of, I think it just goes back to the fact that I like, stories with a happy ending, and stories that are joyful, and that, are about forming connections and people finding their families and not being alone anymore. I also really gruesome thrillers sometimes, but what I always go back to is stories with happy ending, and romance novels celebrate love. So yeah, I think that's why.
We know that you have this academic background, and most if not all of your books are set in academia. So how much of your personal experiences and that background do you include in your writing?
Definitely a lot, but not in a straightforward way. It's not like, everything that has happened to my characters has happened to me, but I kind of take things that have happened to me or to my friends. I take things that I've heard about, take things that, I was afraid would happen, take things that they seem plausible to me. I tried to kind of make fun of academia a little bit, because I think it's an environment that takes itself very, very seriously in a sort of obnoxious way. And I try to make fun of that. I would say that there is definitely a lot of my experience in my books, but not in I actually faked it at one of my professors way,
Yeah. I'm almost halfway through the Love Hypothesis, right? So I'm really enjoying it, and I'm not a romance reader, right? So, but I really am liking this book. But I think there's some really interesting moments where you're not necessarily like sounding the alarm that all of these things happen to women in, like STEM academia, but it's like, yeah, these things still exist. These things still happen. Women are still treated like this very often, and it just kind of makes you aware, like it's still, still something.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it definitely is. I mean, it's definitely hard to be, a woman in STEM, because it's definitely a male dominated field. It's yeah, it's definitely something that, you know, it's something that has happened. It's something that I have felt, and something that my friends have felt. And we just, I don't know, it's nice to talk about it and make fun of it. And like, you know, it's our lived experience, and it's always nice to write something that feels, you know, true, that feels like your truth.
So, Ali,
Yep, go for it.
do you have an all-time favorite romance trope?
You know, it really changes. I want to say probably like fated mates. I really like the idea of like people being destined to be together. It's not like a trope that marries well with, you know, contemporary rom-coms. It's something that is more, you find it more in fantasy and paranormal, but yeah, that's probably my all-time favorite, I want to say. Um, but you know, I like a lot of tropes. I like, you know, definitely enemies to lovers, opposites attract. Yeah, so many.
Have you tackled a trope that was more difficult to write than you expected?
I feel like, yeah, I can't really say much about my fourth book, the one that I just turned in, but that was like that was a book that I really, really wanted to. I can't really talk about
Okay,
the book, but I can tell you that just because I think it hasn't been accepted by my publisher, I don't think yet. So I'm not 100% sure that it will even be published. But I did write that book, and I did turn it in, and it was like a trope that I really, really wanted to write, and a book that I really, really wanted to write. But then when I went to write it, I definitely struggled. I was like, okay, this is harder than I thought.
So your latest work, that Loathe to Love You, was just released at the beginning of this year. And can you share what it's about with listeners?
Of course. So it's actually an anthology of novellas. The novellas already came out last year in different formats. So they first came out in audiobook, and then they came out in ebook. So if they feel like familiar to you when you read the blurbs, that's why. But now they're coming out in paperback with a bonus chapter that kind of like ties together all the novellas. But they are three novellas about three women who are PhD students or were PhD students in engineering. And, you know, they got their degrees, and then they kind of moved in different cities, which is something that happens a lot, you know, when you're in academia and you kind of have to follow your wherever jobs there are, which sometimes isn't that many. And they all find love separately on their workplaces. And at the same time, they, you know, talk to each other a lot. And it's kind of this combination of finding love and, you know, friendship following a move thing, which is definitely something I was living at the time. So yeah, that's it. The main theme of all three novellas is enemies to lovers, in the sense that all the novellas, in all the novellas, the ladies have this kind of sorry, my cat is attacking me. In all the novellas, the ladies have this kind of rivalry or enemy-like relationship with some of their colleagues, and then they kind of end up together with that colleague, which, you know, is a fun trope, I think.
Yeah, and I actually just finished up the print version of Loathe to Love You last night. I had already listened to the novellas on different road trips last summer when I was like, oh, there's the next one. I can listen to Stuck With You now, and then got to Below Zero. And I was trying to think last night, or, you know, as I was looking at my notes before our interview this morning, of like, could I pick a favorite out of it? I was like, I don't know, but I do have to say I really loved Hannah and Ian's story, but I loved Sadie and Eric's, and I loved Mara and
I can't think of his name either. Liam, maybe.
Woo!
Yeah.
Really picking my brain this
I think Hannah and Ian is my favorite as well. I just like the idea of, like, I don't know, of people saving each other.
Yeah, for sure.
It's my dramatic self.
Kind of sticking with the, you know, vein of love stories was whose love story did you start writing first? Have a
Yeah,
different
I wrote
order?
them in order as
Okay.
they were published and as they appear in the anthology.
I've probably given it away already, but devoted fans of your work, and I'm talking to myself here, and I'm sure plenty of our listeners, we might have already listened to the trio of novellas, since you published them via digital audio and ebook first. I think that was such a cool and unique thing. As an avid audiobook listener, I was like, hey, we got these first. Would you be able to share what inspired that decision?
Um, I don't know because like all these decisions are really made by my publisher. I think they were kind of experimenting a little bit with the format because at the same time, a friend of mine who's also one of my favorite authors, her name is Denise Williams, and we share a publisher, and she kind of had the same experience. Like she wrote a kind of trilogy of novellas, and hers also came out first in audio, then in ebook, and now they're coming out. I think in March or February they're coming out is as an anthology. And the theme for her stories there are three stories that are kind of like set in an airport, which I think is so cool and unique. And yeah, I'm not sure why, honestly. I don't know what Berkeley was thinking, but I'm sure that they had their reasons.
So in a lot of the reviews or feedback that I have looked at about your writing, because I have not read everything like Kelsey has, but she's telling everyone to read her book. She loves them so much. But the one thing that I have really taken away so far, your female characters are smart, they are career focused, ambitious, and successful in the sort of careers that women aren't often put in novels. And so to me, that's just really refreshing. It feels, and I don't know why it should, but it feels new to me. Like, because the stories aren't just about women falling in love, right? They're tackling issues like sexism, equity, inclusion, and just even that male opinions are often privileged over female voices, not, just simply because they're male. So anyway, I'm finding these characters just really ones to champion. And then you have another book coming out in June of this year, Love Theoretically. Can you tell us anything about that book?
Yes, so that's my third full-length book, and it's another fake dating story, but it's actually a fake dating story in which the female main character is fake dating the brother of the male main character. So what happens in Love Theoretically is that the main character, Elsie, is someone who she's an adjunct professor, so she makes very little money. She has no health insurance, which is a problem because she has type 1 diabetes and needs insulin. And to, earn a little bit more money, she fake dates as a profession. So basically, if, someone needs a date to their, family reunion or something, she does that for a price. And she has been fake dating the brother of the main male character. So, and she, every time she goes on a fake date, she builds a new identity. So the main male character is kind of knows her as a librarian because that's the identity that she has built. She knows her as, he knows her as someone who's a completely different person. And one day she makes it to the final stage of a very prestigious MIT interview, and she finds the brother of the guy she's been fake dating there, and she realizes that kind of like her two different lives have collided. And it's kind of like the story of them getting to know each other, and it like the backdrop is a faculty search, which is this very stressful thing that happens whenever people in academia trying to find a professor job. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, of course, now we're going to have to go put it in a pre-order cart for the library, and I will probably have to go pre-order it myself now that I see the release date. So, and as our listeners know, of course, we can't end the episode without asking a little bit about your reading habits. Would you mind sharing what you're currently reading, or is it all romance books, or, you've touched on that you read some other genres like thrillers?
I guess the book that I'm reading right now is Christina Lauren's next book. It's The True Love Experiment. And it's amazing. It's such an ode to romance novels. I feel like it would be the perfect introductory read for non-romance readers, it's just, I always love Christina Lauren. They are, they write like these really sexy and heartfelt and funny rom-coms. They're amazing. They also started with fan fiction, so it's kind of what we're talking about. I get to disconnect my brain and think about something else. But anyway, I highly recommend this book. I think it's coming out, I want to say March, but I don't remember. In terms of I also I've been reading a lot of thrillers this year. I know I'm super late, but I just finished The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and I loved it so much. It kind of, and then what other thriller that I liked recently were The Silent Patient, and Daisy Darker. Yeah, I think that's and also, of course, like everyone else in the world, I am listening to the audiobook of Despair because I must.
Thanks for joining us this morning.
We just thank you for putting these great stories out into the world for people to enjoy. And
thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.